we collect recyclable, we make it into the material, then CPG then create the shampoo bottles and say this is 100%. And then after that, we communicate with consumer and say, hey, our entire bottle is actually carbon negative. And in fact, because of our carbon negative packaging, it actually make our product net zero. The environmental evangelists will come in and buy the product and say, I like what you're doing. And then I actually am willing to pay you a little bit extra. In fact, I'm willing to do more. I'm willing to do it as such that after I use the product, when the empty product, I'll bring it back and then we'll go into the entire route again. So this, from an economic point of view, it will start to reduce on the direct material cost. But meanwhile, you can sell at a premium and you also create the stickiness to create all of that.
Welcome back, everybody. Rich Brubaker, mission-driven entrepreneur, here today with a good friend of mine, Kian Seah, who is the founder of Heng Hiap Industries. We've known each other for almost 25 years now, traveled around Asia, working in supply chain. But little did I know that Kian would set up what is a massive plastic recycling industry down in Malaysia. Kian, thank you very much, as always, for joining us to talk a little about your work. As a starting point, personal introduction and a little bit of the mission that you're on.
Thanks for having me here, Rich. My name is Kian Seah. I'm the CEO and founder for Heng Hiap Industries, or HHI. HHI is an end-to-end integrated plastic recycling company in the space. So we collect the post-consumer scrap, within Malaysia, and then we export it to 38 different countries. Personally, I believe we have a plastic ignorance problem globally. So I think we'll kickstart with that simply because there's just so much that we can actually find out, and also about the inherent properties of plastic, and then the technologies that we can do to viralize that, and how can we actually bring that back to achieve that circularity that everyone is reading every now and then.
When did plastic become your mission, and what catalyzed you into the space?
So our family business is actually metal recycling and paper recycling. Basically, we collect the metal scrap and paper scrap and we supply to steel mills and paper mills. We don't do the actual melting of paper or or creating pulps like that. But being someone in one of the two largest metal and paper recycling company in Malaysia, I actually have an observation that whenever I'm awake, I'm able to touch plastic within my hand reach. However, I have no idea how plastic is being recycled. So that kind of got me to be very curious that, hey, what's happening in the space? And very quickly, I found out about the fragmentation in plastic recycling.
So it was an intellectual curiosity that catalyzed you into the space versus you're seeing plastic and you're like, I've got to save the world.
I think it started from that curiosity. And to me, it was something that was so obvious that this is something variable. How come people are not seeing it? And it just got to a point that it kind of, it pushes me to do something about it and to find out more about it. I think it's just that obvious reality right in front of me, and that curiosity to do that, and also loving the challenge behind it. I think this, combination of these three, that got me kick-started.
You talk about ignorance, you talk about systems, but what's the size of the systemic challenge that we face in not just recovering the plastic, but actually putting it back into a useful form?
I think we kind of go back and look into the entire thing about plastic. I think one of the things, plastic, it's light, it's beautiful, it's relatively cheap, easy to handle, easy to ship and all that. But one of the things that plastic offer is convenience. So that, and that kind of give birth to linear consumption, that we make things faster, better, cheaper, and then after consumption, we just discard it. So from the whole B2B point of view, it worked, because we know how to make things faster, better, cheaper, and prettier. And then from a consumer point of view, it also worked, because I use it, and after that, it gives me a convenience, and I just throw it. And so it sort of worked until B2B to C. But the thing is that, the load, the liability that we was creating was actually on the environment. And I think, it come to a point when it hit the ocean, that's where it created a reversal. I think all of us, saw that one video that, a straw was pulled out from a nostril of a turtle. That literally changed the industry. To me, I still cannot believe how powerful that video was, the video clip was, because for the first time, consumers are rejecting plastic. Yeah. So then, we start to go back and say, hey, you know what? The linear consumption pattern, it doesn't work for us. So the thing is that how are we going to create that circularity, to do that? But in order to do that, we have to give up convenience. So the question is, are we ready to give up convenience?
So tell me about the work of HHI and how are you trying to close this loop on the plastic waste challenge?
I think when we talk about sustainability, closing the loop, such a big, complex subject. And we distill it down to a more simplified model. We call it a 5C model. So first C is to collect the scrap. Second C is to convert to an industrial material that can be spec'd into, electronic, automotive and whatnot, cosmetic. And then the third thing is actually co-create. Now, co-create, this is the life cycle development model that we are talking about. How are we going to create, co-create that model? That to us, the third C is a very important part. The fourth C is champion. So these are the big brands, that will need to champion that and communicate with the consumer. And then the fifth C is communication. So for HHI, we actually take care of the first and second C. So we created the collection network that try to collect these recyclables and then finally convert that into specialized material through mechanical recycling or chemical recycling.
What is the stage of the market right now for collecting, plastics? I've noticed in the past that if the economy is really good and say the price of oil is high, everyone wants recyclable. But if the economy is kind of shaky and the price of oil is low, nobody really cares about recycling. It comes down to the pricing.
The overall sentiment for the market is that it has been a little bit of a pendulum swing. I think, during the, 2 or 3 years ago, we could start to see more and more build up, related to sustainability offering. And then I think this year we start to see that there's a bit of a swing back to business as usual. That first, we did sustainability, it was new to all of us. So we went through the entire process of sourcing the material, qualifying the material, co-creating that product, work with champion, communicate with consumer. So we kind of tested out on the market and see how the market is reacting. Market actually reacted really well to a certain extent. And then I think the industry is calibrating at this point of time. And when this year, when we start to go into a high interest rate, high inflationary, while we are calibrating, there is a shift, towards, focus on bottom line. And I think starting from this year again, starting from Q3, Q4, the momentum actually start to swing back again. So it's a lot of dynamics, in the marketplace, and we just have to we just need to get a good sense about that.
What do you think are going to be the breakthroughs or the mindsets or the economies that need to break through for us to find like a common growth over time?
When we enable this entire plastic circularity, one of the things that we can really showcase is the GSG emission. How much carbon, a carbon footprint that we are able to generate from our consumption and circularity model. We hear the European EU are talking about carbon border tax, so on and so forth. Let's see how the whole situation unfolds.
So is it really an issue of regulation more than, say, innovation or economics right now? Or is the regulation economic connection actually the one that's the biggest challenge right now?
So I think, right now, because of the business as usual, high inflationary, high interest rate, products are being commoditized at the fastest rate ever. So I think that becomes something that's very, very challenging. So I mentioned there are two factors to watch. The first factor to watch is basically, on the regulation side. The second factor to watch is the change of consumer behavior, what consumer really wants. So for us, through our study, especially, there's this group that we call environmental evangelists. These are the group that actually are able to forego convenience. They are able to go extra mile, in order to preserve the plastic circularity. And these are the ones who will pay a bit more, to whatever goods that they're consuming, and they will make sure that they will contribute it back to the entire cycle. So when we talk about the circularity model, what we could do is that when we are able to connect all that 5C together, so imagine, let's just say a shampoo bottle. So what we do is that we collect recyclable, we make it into the material that can be sent for shampoo bottles. Then CPG then create the shampoo bottles and say this is 100%. And at the same time, we actually attest that the quality is same. So we are not going to compensate on the quality requirement. So it will still be exactly the same. And then after that, we communicate with consumer and say, hey, through our calculation, our entire bottle is actually carbon negative. And in fact, because of our carbon negative packaging, it actually make our product net zero, for example. So the the environmental evangelist will come in and buy the product and say, I like what you're doing. And then, I actually am willing to pay you a little bit extra. In fact, I'm willing to do more. I'm willing to do it as such that after I use the product, when the empty product, I'll bring it back, and then we'll go into the entire route again. So this, from an economic point of view, it will start to reduce on the direct material cost. But meanwhile, you can sell at a premium, and you also create the stickiness to create all of that. So it is now up to the B to B to C to come together to create this entire circularity.
How do you create a strategy, plan, and execute on a vision like that? Like, how are you positioning yourself to make that happen? And what are some of the key things that you think you need to get done as part of that?
Oh my God, that's just so much that needs to be done and all that, So I think having a clear map, it is very important. Yeah, a map, a strategy, it's very important. And then after that, to actually convert everything on paper. So we went as far as creating, to think about what would be the inevitable change of the plastic consumption pattern and human being. So fast forward, 50 years from now, 2073, what will happen to the plastic consumption pattern, and what do we foresee? So there are only two possible outcomes. One possible outcome is a plastic-free society, that we as a society we quit plastic as a whole, and the other likely scenario will be a plastic neutral society, meaning whatever that we do, that we'll convert everything back. I inherently, am positive, a positive person, and I believe in evolution. And I always believe that evolution will evolve in a more efficient manner, that therefore plastic neutrality is a likely outcome. So then we actually break that down and say, in order for us to create the circularity, what has to happen? What has to take place? So we sort of have the milestone in front of us, and how fast and how slow we can move towards that, that is the time we will still need to align to the government, like what you said, the market, the government, the economic, the regulatory framework. And then that's where we adjust our momentum accordingly. The second thing is that it requires change. So we need to come up with another innovation, and we need to think about, what's the funding that comes from that, and before that, what are some of the things that can fundamentally change the entire model. So our job are basically trying to, come up with a matrix and see what works and what doesn't work. But I can tell you this. If I put it in ratio, I definitely fail a lot more than I succeed. So it's a 70-30, 70% of what I try, it doesn't work. And then 30% is like, oh, I didn't see that coming. That's nice that it worked. So I think having the greed to actually suck up on all that, to accept, it didn't work.
Everyone talks about, every failure is just a lesson in hiding, blah, blah, blah. Like, no failure is actually failure. It's just, how do you make sure you get the most out of a failure so you can laugh on a podcast with me about it?
So I actually have to equate everything to $1 and cent. So then I literally have to have a budget, when I fail, what is the financial consequences? Can I actually absorb that? And I think that's something that's very, very important. It's very practical. It's very pragmatic. It is not a personal, it's not a personal, mental, and emotional currency we're talking about, because it deals with the entire evolution of the company. So it has to connect to the top line and bottom line. So if, let's say, that already has been quantified, then if it's within that quantum, it is okay. It's calculated. That was the best decision. And then we learn and move on, and then see how we're going to recover the currency, with our next project, so on and so forth.
But are there ever failures that are just pure failures? Like, we didn't learn anything from this. Like, we should have never gone down this path. Have you ever had that? And how do you keep that from happening again in the future?
So we do have an R&D roadmap that can help us to chop off, to kill off some of the project that we think it's not going to bring us any economic outcome. Now, there are some learning that we stumble into some process that we make huge mistake, during our production. But as an outcome of that, there was some unintended result that created, maybe one of our fast selling product in the process. So I think, these are the fun part in the innovation journey, I should say.
Talk to me about like pushing through your limits. We have these really big challenges, but you have a business to run. How do you look at the work that you're doing, and then how do you continually like push to do more of it?
What we're trying to do is to activate the bottom up, solution. Because, right now, the real challenge, the real plastic crisis are happening in developing country. In developing country, the top-down initiative in terms of the result are somewhat mixed. So for me, I think the part that can actually create a bigger change is actually creating a bottom-up solution. And I think that's something that we see that we can actually make, hopefully regional or global impact accordingly.
How much practical do you have to keep the mission of solving this challenge? Like, how far can you push the mission against the business model?
So it is an iteration process. And in that iteration process, the economic part of it is something that's actually to us very important, because the economic part also showcase, definitely in terms of the way that we're thinking, we're innovating, that we're commercializing, are we valorizing or not? Now, so to valorize, to create that value, it has to be a value that fits. If you create a value that's too ahead of time, you're not able to realize that. If you're too behind, you're not going to get that. So I think, having that alignment to actually be a little bit more fluid and adaptive to the market environment, it's something that's very important. My personal learning is that, always slightly over design, along the way. So it is true that over design that we stay ahead, and also can showcase to our customer that, hey, actually there's such thing that you have in the market. So for me, what I foresee is something that's very simple, going back to our personal neutrality point of view. Again, so kind of like one of the things that, we see in the States that I always bring it to food. Back then, when both of us were in school 25 years ago, we turn around and look at the nutrition facts. It is per batch and all that. And if you were to look at, whatever you're holding in your hand, what is the exact calorie? You never know. There's some calorie in there. They give you some indication. You have to do some math. And then, whether that's 100%, you don't know for sure. But if you look at, that today in the States, you basically see that it's very clearly spelled out. It's 263, 512, 128. So it's going to be super. It's going to be to be calculated, to that precise manner. What I foresee is that when we move towards a plastic neutral society, our future plastic product will actually have the same thing. What is the CO2 of that packaging that goes to that product? So consumer, as you are buying that, you are basically netting off your CO2 as you go. These are the kind of things that we are going towards. And then as of now, almost all of our products are carbon negative product when they go out of our factory. So I think that's super exciting.
You put out a vision like that, and I'm kind of thinking, what does your team think about what you had to say in this? Like, are they fully on board with you? Do they think that this is crazy and you should focus on business? What kind of people are surrounding you and helping you make these decisions?
So my team, when I talk to my team about, all these things, my team always think that I'm crazy. I think, we all sort of, got a bit high with that a little bit of that craziness. We are all architects and builders. So we start to see all of that, and we start to put in, we build on that. And so that it's not just a story. It's very scientific. It's very tangible. And then it is also well substantiated, everything that we're talking. So we have measurement, behind it. And the other one is that we are hopeful, that we think that it will come. All the carbon negative things that I'm telling you is super exciting. Are we getting paid more? Marginally. It's not equitable, but we're fine with it. But we are hopeful that it will actually speed up the shift from that linear economy to a more circular one.
What needs to happen the next few years to create that that flywheel effect?
So for us, we are constantly looking for believers, who believe in our mission, our vision, things that we want to do. And I think it starts with that you believe in it and you see the same plastic neutral society that we see. It's just a matter of time, how fast or how slow we get that. So believers, it's something that's actually that's very important. The second part of it is that they want to be part of our team to build. If they believe, but they are not contributing, well, it's better than none. But for us, those that we bring them in, they actually literally need to be part of our design team, our constructing team, our architect, our builder team, to actually walk their talk. And I think this part is someone that's actually very, very important. And the third thing, it's continue to build and create the value that the society needs, at that time, so that we can actually show growth on top and bottom line. We need to create a machine that can grow by itself, and from there, then we can create the powerhouse that can actually take on the primary role to recycle plastic in developing country.
Who do you learn from? What's the role of mentors or advisors or coaches in your life? Or do you just go and, scour the internet for answers at, late at night when you're trying to answer a big question?
So I do have mentor who I talk to on a periodic basis. We have NED, non-executive director, and even a consultant that's actually advising us so that we are actually on the right track. And then the other part is fellowship. Having someone that I have my own recycle bin, that anything that keeps me up at night, I can go to this group, we call forum together, and then to be able to vent, to learn from each other, to go through that self-discovery journey. I think that actually helped me to build and to remain, constructive.
At some point, you're gonna try and kind of create a scorecard for the work that you did. How do you measure and define your own success?
I think I will go back to what got me started, which is plastic ignorance. How would I be able to help all the stakeholders, everybody, to see that plastic is actually an item that is variable. And then in order to achieve our plastic neutrality, plastic recycling is a big piece of it. And for me, I would then look into my role, that how easy have I made it, for everyone who want to participate in recycling to be able to do so. So how do I create the convenience? How do I create the simplified manner? How do I showcase, the plastic recycling rate in a developing country? So, for example, if we talk about global plastic recycling rate in globally, it's about 11%. So, if we were to look at Malaysia as a country, what's a plastic recycling rate? Our national plastic recycling rate reported is actually 30%. And this 30% are actually done through a bottom-up approach, right now through our integrated model. So if I were to put a KPI that if, let's say, this become a national phenomena, this is making a national impact, that would be a KPI that I look at, that, hey, collectively 28,000 of us, are we able to go from 32 to 42, and that at some point to 50 or 60? And I think that will actually be one of the indicators. But the more important thing is for everyone to look at that and start to see the resource within that, and think about, hey, what are the other creative ways that we could do to viralize that? Doing what we are doing, we then can see from that circularity model that we are doing in the bottom-up approach, collectively as an ecosystem or as a community, how much, carbon credit that we have been able to save and contribute to the country. I think those are some of the numbers that I think will make my journey meaningful and impactful.
To other entrepreneurs or executives in this community or this fellowship who are kind of embarking on a mission of their own, what are some pieces of advice you'd give them as they're either solidifying their focus or building their business model for change?
I think find your tribe. It's very important to find your tribe. Whatever I'm doing, I have believers and I have people who doesn't believe in it. And I think finding that portfolio for those who believe becomes something that's very important. So start with the team. If the team believes that, hey, this is what we need to do, this is how we need to calibrate, I think that's very, very important. Then all the stakeholders, whether it's supplier or customer, find the same tribe. There are some believers, there are not believers. And not only that, we need to help our customer to communicate with the the end consumer, because customer will need to communicate with end consumer, and we need to give them, a lot of content, a lot of data, a lot of numbers, a lot of analysis to support their communication, so that their communication, it will help them to create their tribe as well.